Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Jaron Jones, CIO of ELM. Jaron, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Jaron, before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Jaron, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about ELM and your role there as CIO?
Yeah, so we're a national utility services company. About 14, 15 states, 1,300 employees at this point in time. We do mostly underground locating, but we do a lot of cool work in gas leak detection space, RTK space, and then ticket risk and analytics as well. So generally, kind of working with a lot of the same utilities and companies and kind of helping them out, whether it be manpower or technology. I think the biggest thing that separates our company from a lot of the other ones in the industry is we make most of our own software in-house. So a lot of those kind of services I was describing are, things that we build internally, lets us be a lot more agile, kind of, like I said, manpower, but also help with a lot of, problems that require technology to solve.
Yeah, that's super cool. So, that's not an easy thing to get into. Now, obviously, it's not like you founded the company or anything, but developing your own utility software, that seems like a challenge.
Yeah. I inherited a lot of it. To be honest, I think most of our stack probably goes back about 20 years. So been around for a bit. There's some things we've made from scratch since I started here. Particularly a lot of our GIS, machine learning, and artificial intelligence stuff. It's kind of more of my background of expertise. So definitely require a lot of work to set that up. But a lot of the, principal business software is kind of there when I got here.
Yeah.
Definitely continuing to improve upon it. But, that structure and, business model of, creating work items, working them, billing them, that a lot of that was in place.
Super cool. Well, let me ask you. So obviously I kind of want to, I'm naturally drawn more to the new AI stuff. I think it's, it's bright and shiny and sexy and everybody wants to talk AI, but, and so I'll get there. But in terms of, with most of your stack being 20 years old, and I think I'd say that's pretty much par for the course when it comes to the, utilities. They tend to be, you get something in place and it lasts for a long time. Is that something where you guys are let me just say in the industry as a whole, is that something that is kind of an ongoing process of having to update that, or have you found a way of kind of stabilizing and securing kind of the old stack and keeping it going for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so I think the people who originally architected this were really smart in how they designed it. And I think one of the major components, and I say the stack is 20 years old, doesn't mean everything is 20 years old.
Right.
I would say most of the core business components now live in Azure, modernized, locked down and compliant. Most of the stuff that is older is, a service. And a lot of those services still work really well. We have a service that geocodes for us. We replaced it probably about a year ago, but until then, it worked pretty well for 20 years. Endpoints is secure, ports are locked down, it's on its own subnet. If it works, it works. Yeah. So, kind of looking at, parts of your stack have to maintain relatively modern, but when you do, have a decoupled architecture like that, you're able to kind of, if something's old and it works and it's secure,
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that for the general tech outsider, looking at the utilities, it's a separate beast in and of itself. And I think kind of wrapping your head around how that kind of works, I think can be challenging. Can you give us a kind of an elementary school kind of rundown on how that works in terms of the how that you use the technology with the utilities to make it all work? Because I think in general people get most platforms, they get SaaS, they get the stuff they see every day, but most people don't get a chance to see what's going on behind the scenes of the electricity's on, it just works, right? But
Yeah.
behind that there's a lot of technology that makes that work, and you're kind of sitting at the head of that. So can you kind of give us people a rundown of how that works, and all the stuff that you're managing and dealing with there?
Yeah, so just one caveat too. We're, utility services company, not a utility.
Right.
So on our end, I would say from a technology standpoint, I think, like I said, a lot of our principal software was architected really intelligently. I think our, original president, our current president, have always seen ELM as a tech forward and sometimes even tech first company. So I think that's kind of important to take in
Nice.
mind, as opposed to, our job isn't to, I don't know, be a federal or local utilities to help them and oftentimes help them with technology.
Mm-hmm.
But the stack and the components, I mean, utility industry is like a lot of industry. You have to receive a work item. Your work item could be a lot of things. In our case, a lot of times it's an 811 ticket. So generally, you can't just go dig with a backhoe somewhere. You have to call, and somebody has to put marks on the ground. Those marks on the ground is so somebody doesn't hit a gas line and cause, hundreds of thousands of dollars of environmental damage, property destruction, things like that. So a lot of the work we get is 811 tickets.
Nice.
Some other scopes of work, we have gas leak detection. So like people who go up and check the meter in your house, RTK services. So, basically the idea of when you have your phone, trying to think of the best way to put this, the GPS is only so accurate. And
Right.
there's a lot of normalization that happens there, but they make these devices that are really accurate, sometimes even within a centimeter. So
Yep.
you can go out with a piece of locating equipment with that, RTK device, and you can map a facility within like a centimeter of accuracy or something like that. So you have all these different things that spawn work items, and you get a work item. Generally, to work that work item, you need to juxtapose it with a map. Because you're in the utility space, you're working a physical object or facility.
Right.
So, generally there's a process of getting the map. Customers host them, provide them, do a lot of different things with them. I would say in the utility industry, much like state and federal government, I would say they're largely in Esri. So we maintain a largely Esri GIS stack, even though we have some components that aren't. So, provide the maps to our people and provide the work ticket to the people. And then, the magic happens. So whatever the service they're providing, they attempt to provide the service with our, technology to process that work and ticket, and then, workflow management, stuff like that, and other technology to, see what they actually need to do.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to know what you need to locate generally if you have a map of the facility when you go out there.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier. Yep. Know where to look and what you're looking for. So then your primary client then is a utility company, right? And you've got the federal and local. Is it federal? I mean, you mentioned federal several times, but how's that work?
I mentioned federal just from a GIS standpoint, like most, if you were to look at a lot of the USGS or federal maps, they're kind of on an Esri stack. We're not, to my knowledge, working in that space a ton, but just government in general is generally on an Esri stack, and I think that's the point I was trying to make there.
Got
But
it.
no, we're generally just working with state and local, to my knowledge. I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, but
Fair enough. That
yeah.
that is a fair point. So now let's dive into the AI. What did I think everybody is kind of fascinated with it. Everybody's eager to see where it goes. where do you see it? How are you guys using it now? And with your background, and where do you see it, playing out in the utility services sector?
Yeah, so really important caveat. I think a lot of the conversation in AI right now is around LLMs and other things like that. I think when you actually look at most business use cases, it's generally still problems that revolve around tabular data. I think that's kind of an important precedent to or set before the conversation.
Yep.
So right now, a lot of what we're doing is using AI to risk tickets. And what that means is you have these work items, so it could be located, it could be something else. And, generally your, KPIs revolve around, not having a damage on that facility because if you locate it correctly, generally you're not going to have a liable damage. And, not just trying to reduce our damages that we're liable for, but reducing non-liable damages too.
Yeah.
So looking at risk factors for that and, creating a lot of regressions and, deep learning models and things like that to kind of help solve that problem. And really one of the ways I approached it when I got into this space is I saw a lot of people, when you get a ticket, there's a bunch of information. It can be who you're working for, who you're working with, where it is, zip code, city, state, stuff like that. And maybe like how large the work area is, how deep it is, excavation depth, whether there's boring on the ticket, so like trenching and boring.
Yep.
My thought was, it's a lot of great information, but ultimately, like you kind of want to bring the GIS into this to do this correctly. Because if you have a model where you know where something's going to happen, like a polygon or a point, if you can extract features out of a map and you can say, oh, I know that, the average pipe on this was installed in 1971 and the material was made out of blank and stuff like that. And then, maybe I can bring in census data and say 38% of the houses in this area were built before 1939 or something like that. Really kind of bringing in the GIS data there to try and make better and more informed decisions, and then ultimately tying it all together in a model to risk tickets appropriately, and whatever the metric, people have different targets they're shooting for and what they want it to accomplish, and we're happy to accommodate that. But just kind of using the available data and bringing that GIS component into it, and that's kind of generally been my background in the area of expertise is kind of looking at traditional problems in analytics, 5 years ago, and, machine learning, artificial intelligence more recently, and bringing in that geospatial component. That data is really valuable. You just have to know how to get it into a model and work with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good point. And I think data is, it's interesting because it's so important to every business, but most businesses have to reach a certain level before they can really start appreciating the real kind of benefit that can come from having somebody who's a data analyst and thinks in terms of data to really kind of extract that and enjoy the benefits of that data. Well, we get a lot of guests on who come to who make their way to the top of the kind of IT chain here, if you will, and they all come from very different backgrounds. It's funny, I don't think we've had two guests who've had the same sort of background, not even that similar, which is odd because you'd think there'd start being some similarities. But I think it's fun to see just how diverse the backgrounds can be. I mean, we've had people go from truck drivers and restaurant managers, and they work their way up to, they get into IT and they work their way up to CIO. For you, can you share with us what your background was, how you got into tech, and how you got to where you are?
Yeah. So trying to think of the best spot to start here. Yeah, so originally went to college, wasn't super sure what I wanted to do. I think I started with the idea of doing computer engineering and became a little less interested in that. I don't think I knew real world jobs I could do with that. I don't think, at least where I grew up in Western Maine in a relatively rural area, albeit there's a small college there. I just don't think I was super aware of, careers in tech. and what I could do with it at all. So I looked at studying veterinary medicine instead.
No,
Um, that being said, I need to pay the bills. So I was doing hardware repair for a local store in town. I was working in a call center as like a tier two tech, troubleshooting point of sale systems for restaurants. So I was still kind of doing a lot of IT stuff on the side because those were just the higher paying support jobs at the time. And especially the call center, I mean, they were open really early and really late, so I could get hours in while I was in school. So that always worked pretty well for me. And the hardware repair, I mean, they don't care when you fix laptops. So kind of continued to do a lot of IT. And towards the end of my bachelor's in pre-veterinary medicine, University of Maine, so our department was horses, cows, and then we had a few faculty that did lobster. So very, very Maine there.
yeah, very me.
And there's a project we had our senior class, and somebody came up and they were like, I have this project that involves lobster. You know, there might be some opportunities that come out of it, but somebody's going to have to do GIS work. That's kind of like, I'd written some code before. I think I can figure this out. And that's honestly a really valuable lesson is just say yes to stuff. You don't know what doors it'll open. But yeah, so I ended up meeting with a graduate student. He gave me a floppy drive. And this isn't like early 2010s. So I hadn't seen a floppy drive in like
You're like,
10
what's
years.
that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it had a really old version of Arc Desktop on it. So it's Esri, their, kind of GIS desktop software. But the older version, they're an Arc Pro now. So I worked on that, played around in GIS, doing some lobster modeling. That was really interesting. Thought it was really fun. And my brother had kind of started his career in tech towards the end of that. And I kind of started to see that was going really well for him, and he's making a lot of money. So I was kind of like, there might be some opportunities here for me. But at the time, my wife was looking at it, or I guess girlfriend at the time, currently wife, was looking at pursuing a PhD. So we wanted something that was similar to Maine, but something that was also, bigger and had more opportunities. There's aren't a lot of jobs in Maine unless you're near Portland, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we chose Missoula over a few other places. Absolutely love it here. Moved to Missoula and needed a job to pay the bills, so I started working here in IT support. My boss pretty quickly identified the call center I'd done a lot of ITAL before, and they needed a lot of help with like their service desk, approvals, ticketing, things like that. So pretty quickly jumped in there, and then they figured out I could do GIS. So they started having me do some of that as well. And at that time, I kind of knew that, I don't know, in any situation, like, you can work really hard and things will generally work out, or you can make sure that things are going to work out. And I knew that my wife was probably going to be in school and postdoc or whatever for a long time. And I was like, I need to find a way to make more money. So I think I finished all of the AWS associate certs at the time in about 4 months, and kind of looked at possibly getting in DevOps, which is what my brother was doing at the time. My boss at the time at Elam was great. He found opportunities for me to do more here, so I didn't leave. And that kind of has happened over and over and over again. And that's kind of where I ended up now. There's definitely some steps between now and then. Getting a graduate degree, teaching at the university, doing a little research at the university here. And a lot of that comes down to just saying yes to stuff. I mean, ultimately, if you like what you do, doing extra work shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, when I was 21, I played video games after work. Now I work on a programming project. I might prefer to play video games a little bit more than a programming project, but when you realize like what the programming project can mean for every other area of your life, if you just do that instead and you still enjoy it, albeit maybe a little bit less, it's generally worth it. So just kind of adopting that strategy and saying yes to a lot over the last 5 years.
I love that. I think that's really good advice. I mean, I often ask people, if what advice they would give, somebody looking to get into tech. And you kind of did. And I'm going to ask you that very question, but I love your whole saying yes, because I'm a big believer in the same thing. Just say yes to everything. It's a great way to get to the top. Maybe once you're there, you need to say no. Then you learn how to say no to things. But I think to get, to progress in life, it comes with a lot of yeses. You don't start by saying no to everything, unless you shut all the doors that are going to be your opportunities, to move up. So that being said, what advice would you give to somebody looking to get into tech today?
It's actually really interesting. I'm thinking about a lot of things right now. I've done a lot of interviews this week, and the juxtaposition of kind of moving up myself versus interviewing people and even teaching at the university. I've kind of seen both sides of it really fast. I would say the biggest one is have identifiable strengths and weaknesses. I see a lot of people who put 10 or 20 things on a resume. Find what you're passionate about and be ready to talk about it and be ready to answer questions about that thing. Anytime somebody offers you an opportunity to get paid to learn, make sure you always say yes to that. If there's a project and you don't know how to do it at work and somebody asks you, they're basically saying, hey, do you want to get paid to learn? Make sure you never turn down those opportunities. I would say those are the big things. Just kind of be honest with where you're at and be ready to talk about those things, because a lot of it comes down to dialogue. When I have somebody's resume in front of me in an interview, there's 100 things on there. I have to find 10 or 15. And if I ask about those 10 or 15 things and I get I don't know, or maybe, or 5-word answers, it's tricky. But if you've got 5 or 10 things on there and you're ready to just talk, those dialogues are generally going to go pretty well for you.
Yeah, no, I think that is fantastic advice. Yeah, and I love your path in, but I have to ask, lobster? There are lobster vets? Is that a thing?
So it was the Department of Animal Science. I don't think it was technically I don't know if they had their VD or not. I know they were a PhD. But I was modeling lobster disease. So there's
Okay.
there's a disease a long time ago called gafkemia that isn't around a whole lot now. But there's a disease that was coming up a lot, and I don't know, when I worked on this 10 years ago or whatever now, called shell disease. And they wanted to model shell disease based on what happened previously with gafkemia, because they have a lot of the same conditions. So it is an interesting problem. Ultimately, it was I don't know if people have ever seen Game of Life or something. I know it's a pretty popular intro to programming project. But kind of that type of project, but for modeling disease based on really temperature and population density.
Very cool. Jaron, this has been a blast, and I think you've shared some great insights, great advice for people looking to get into the field. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about ELM?
I think the ELM website's elmllc.com. I'll double check that really quick.
And we'll link it below too.
Yeah, elmllc.com. Personally, only social media I really use is LinkedIn. So I think it's Jaron Jones 3K, and then Strava. I spend most of my free time running, biking, and hiking. So there's only 2 sites I'm active on, so that's where people have to find me.
I love it. Well, Jaron, thanks for coming on, and until next time.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.